to infinity and beyond.
What's up, everybody? It's Roger and James here from Infinity and Beyond, presented by DisGaming.com and DisKingdom.com. In this episode, we are going to be talking about Marvel, and apparently in a recent interview they did with Gamespot, they are open to working with indies. They are working. There was I find all the information over on the website. They've kind of got. They're talking about all kinds of different things. They were talking about, they've got some incredible new mobile console and VR games planned, but they can't talk about them yet. But they're curating their profile and just trying to find the best match for character, partner, genre, platform, and trying not to see who wants a license to make a game. We're very active in planning what the right experiences are for the right franchises on the right platform, as well as finding the right partners who can provide that. And one of the things that they did say about was going for the indie things. They were asked, have you ever thought about licensing out Marvel properties to smaller indie studios? Which they said, we're looking at mobile and we're looking at VR. And Insomniac is actually an independent studio, but they're in terms of smaller ones. From a strategy and portfolio standpoint, we're making sure to get the big behemoths set up first. We have our live service games, our mobile games, big console games. But once all of those tempos are established, I think the next step would be to create smaller, interesting indie games. I'm not announcing a new game, but kind of falling in line with that. So it definitely sounds like when they say like live gaming, that sounds like Marvel Heroes is now up and running. So that's their live service sorted. They got their big games and they got sorting out their mobiles and stuff. So I'm thinking like indie games, and for me, it feels like the indie game in the last couple of years has really started to rise. People are so much more into smaller indie titles because the word indies doesn't necessarily mean bad quality anymore. There are so many good ones out there, and they make money, and also they often are maybe a little bit more profitable because the costs are so much less. So what did you think of this kind of information?
Well, I think the main thing that jumps out to me is that I hope that their definition of indie isn't too far off from our definition of indie, because if they're citing Insomniac as an indie studio, they're not wrong, but that's not normally what we mean when we're talking about an independent studio. This is a studio with, sure, Rocksteady. That's an independent studio. I mean, obviously, they're not wrong, but it's not what we mean. Now, let's assume though that when they're talking about independent, they do talk about the same thing that we think about of independent, which is normally maybe like a 5 to 10 man team working maybe not 40-hour a week. They're kind of doing it on top of their normal job kind of stuff. Yeah. Smaller projects, maybe pixel art style projects, or side scroller stuff that's a little more retro in styling. And as long as they keep the quality of them, I'm all for this. I could totally be down for, a $10 or $15 adventure, 5 hours of gameplay or less, as long as it ends up, maintaining a standard of quality. Sure, bring it on. Let's throw back to the, the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era of side-scroll and beat-em-ups. There were some fantastic Marvel properties back then. Yeah. They weren't developed by indies, but that's now the realm of the indies. So
I mean, for example, I downloaded a couple of indie games this week. I downloaded Mighty Gunvolt Blast on the Switch, which is kind of like a Mega Man clone, which is pretty hard, but again, it's £8-9. I downloaded Snake Pass because that was on sale on the Switch as well. Smaller ones, and there are some great games out there. Rocket League is essentially an indie game. This is very, very popular. I think of like Super Meat Boy. There's so many great games out there. Shovel Knight, and they don't necessarily always have to be, the idea of like being 2D scrollers, but there is a market for that, and there's but making them good. And I think if you've got a small team working on it, like. I think someone said like Hotspot Miami would be great as a Punisher style, a top-down just Punisher just blasting people, and just having fun with the licenses. Maybe like do a Defenders one or something like that, like a Streets of Rage. Not necessarily being retro, but that style of gameplay fits that kind of price point and what they can do with it. And I would love to see some kind of different takes, because it reminds me of like last year, Disney did something with Tron. They did Tron Run, which kind of came out of nowhere. Didn't really have a lot of a big budget. It was only like 15 quid. It was a really fun game, right? And it was right in an era where, we only had Disney Infinity, and this game came out of nowhere, really cheap, and it was an indie title, and I loved it. And I bought the season pass, and I thought it was great. And it's that thing of like, a lot of these franchises, they can't be put around $100 million AAA title, but give the people the right thing. You could get a fun game with these characters, and I'm kind of, it's really interesting to see like them sort of saying this rather than, like you say, going for the big AAA games.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you have the big AAA games like Spider-Man, which we talked about previously, obviously the production values are huge. They look like they're going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of quality involved. But at the same time, the developers can't take as many risks in a AAA game. I mean, it's fun when they do, but when they're putting that much money into it, they have to play it safe. That's just the reality of the situation. And if you're talking about indies, you don't have to play it safe. You can just like completely go out there, and it might not work, but at least you get to try. And you know what, I wouldn't call like $50,000 or $100,000 chump change or anything, but relative to the budget of a AAA title, it's nothing. Disney could toss that out there and just write it off as like their stock dropped 0.02% or something. And it gives them a chance to work with non-AAA brands. So you mentioned The Punisher. That would be like great, obviously, but they could do a tie-in with Cloak and Dagger, the TV show coming out next year, The New Warriors with Squirrel Girl, and not need to put that much money into it, so it's not a huge risk, but could end up being a really fun game and a fun way of tying into it without it having to be like this massive 300-person studio.
Yeah, and also I think as well as like people's expectations for like a $10, $15 game are a lot less. But there's been some really good ones. But I also feel for me as well, like you've got like us where, we're older gamers, and we're more, there's a lot more of us around now, we're the mass majority of gamers. And we haven't got the time for these, 100-hour Zeldas and Horizons. And so a small game that you can just jump into, play for a week, and be done with it, kind of fits lifestyles a little bit easier. And, there's that thing of, I think this is a great idea. I would love to see a little bit more of this. More titles is good, but also variety. Shooters, platformers, not necessarily, the big open space ones like Spider-Man, but something a little bit more, because I almost feel like Telltale game almost feels like feels like an indie game.
I mean, in many ways it is.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a much smaller effort. It's much more contained. Most of them are done within 6 to 10 hours. So, and then you're done with them. There's very little incentive to go back and replay Telltale games, except to see, well, I decided to have Star-Lord fight alongside Gamora this time. Let's see what happens if he fights alongside Drax this time. Or do I side with Rocket Raccoon when he's being a jerk about visiting his abandoned planet or whatever? But but it's a perfect example. It's not a AAA title, but it lets them go off and experiment, try out a different storytelling style, a different gameplay style, and they get to play with the Guardians without really, going in and being like, well, why can't I just like destroy thousands of Chitauri or whatever?
Yeah, no, but it definitely looks pretty good. As like I said, it's for as someone that kind of, I wouldn't say I'm an indie darling, but there's been a lot that's come through, like PlayStation Plus and stuff that has caught my eye. I've been a little bit more open to, but I don't know. The Switch definitely seems to become like. But I always found like the Vita was the one thing as well that I remember. The PS Plus and indie games was something that was very, very good on a portable handheld version. And I just feel it could be a good little site. And there's also, I wouldn't necessarily would want movie tie-ins, but like you say, you could do something along those lines where you go, right, okay, we've got this license, we've got this movie coming out in 3 years with this character. Do something with this character. Don't necessarily, here's a general story, but it's not a movie tie-in, but kind of get it out around the same time kind of thing.
Right, and you don't even have to necessarily do direct tie-ins. You could do a little fun simulator game starring Cosmo, the dog from the first Guardians of the Galaxy. He's got exactly 5 seconds of screen time in that movie, but there's no reason you couldn't have a game with him.
Yeah, it's that thing as well of like, just make an Incredible Hulk game where there is a lot of scope, but they can do individual stuff and a much better quality maybe than a mobile game. So that cross between the two. So no, I think it's great. I think it'll be great to see what comes from Marvel this way. And the small little stuff is definitely a good thing in my book.
Now we do have to keep in mind though when we talk about like how good indie games are, a lot of that is very simply us only remembering the good indie games because literally hundreds of these games come out every month, and most of them are completely forgettable, and most of them I wouldn't spend any money on because they're just not worth it. But when the good ones come out, and it does seem like there's a higher percentage of good ones these days, they tend to be well worth the money, well worth the time, and we should absolutely support them when they do a good job.
I must admit, when I play things like Super Meat Boy and Shovel Knight, and because I want to download Wonder Boy as well, that's another one on my list to download as well. Definitely excited to see that. But it's that thing, is that not necessarily playing old, not that retro feel, but it's not retro because it's brand new, and they're tough. I've sometimes played it's like I played platformers for 5 years as a childhood. Why am I so bad at these? And it's like, no, it's because so these people have grown up on them as well, and I want them to be a challenge. And it just should be good. I would love to see something like that coming along. Certain characters fit it easier, and I just think, like I say, a Defenders like side-scrolling beat 'em up, would just work so well.
I would have no problem with that. I'd absolutely love to, do an old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever stuff. The old X-Men, Spider-Man, Maximum Carnage. Play as Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, or Daredevil, and they all have their own unique movesets. Even throw in, Colleen Wing or Misty Knight as well.
Sounds good. We'd love to know what you guys think of this. Would you like to see some more Marvel indie titles? And have you got any suggestions for what you'd like to see? We'd love to know your comments. Get in touch with us as per usual. You can find us over at DisGaming.com and DisKingdom.com. You can hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. You can also hit that, give us a review also on audio platforms. This month we're giving away Guardians of the Galaxy Telltale game over at thisgaming.com/giveaway. James, where can they find you?
You can find me at heroiclegacy.com, and I will make sure to point out that we should have a Speedball Bubble Bobble crossover game.
Or Peggle.
Or Peggle. Guys, make it happen.
We should see you guys soon. Later.